My dear students of second semester of Assam University Dipu campus, I would like to forward a lecture on William Wordsworth's The Prelude, which constitutes the finest monument of Wordsworth's poetry. As you know, Wordsworth was essentially the most powerful pioneer of the Romantic movement in England, and together with his friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge, he was profoundly influenced by the French Revolution because he was an eyewitness to the sufferings of the common man along with the fall of Bastille in France. And after the French Revolution was over, Wordsworth and Coleridge returned home because their hope of alleviating the sufferings of the ailing humanity was not realized. And this had a direct repercussion on his most monumental creation, the Prelude, which is variously interpreted as an autobiographical poem, a narrative, philosophical, psychological narrative, and finally a poetic Bildungsroman. And to begin with, Wordsworth's Prelude is a brilliant romantic poem which is structurally executed within the framework of 14 books. And these 14 books can be structurally divided into 3 parts, whereas book 1 deals with his childhood and boyhood days. From chapter 2 to chapter 7, Wordsworth devotes the first part to his own fanciful reaction of childhood and youth in the Lake District, together with his experiences London and Cambridge. The second section, comprising book 9 to book 11, details his exciting adventures in France, with special emphasis on the pervasive influence of the French Revolution on Wordsworth's mind and heart. The third section, consisting of book 12 to book 14, is decidedly significant because it bears true testimony to Wordsworth's mature metaphysical mind, which is manifested through his philosophy of art, imagination, and literary taste, thereby justifying Wordsworth's maturity of mind and vision. The Prelude was initially intended to fulfill 3 important objectives. First, it was a somewhat re-examination of Wordsworth's own personality. Second, it was a poem initially intended to honor Coleridge. And third, it was a poem in which Wordsworth tended to create an introduction to his most philosophical poem called The Recluse. Be what it may, Prelude is essentially a philosophical and a psychologically surcharged poem because it is about action of ideas. I repeat, action of ideas. And it is also about the different approaches and attitudes that took place in the poetic mind and soul of Wordsworth. To begin with, the book 1 of Prelude, it entails a trajectory into life, both external and internal. Externally, book 1 points to the poet's physical journey from London to his beloved Lake District, and internally it indicates his search for a solid medium to ventilate his aggrieved and wounded feelings after the bitter and disillusioned experiences in France in the backdrop of French Revolution. The Prelude is an autobiographical creation of the poet's mind and heart, and the very subtitle of the poem, The Growth of the Poet's Mind, vindicates the fact that the poem is a psychological autobiography that deals with the growth of the poet's mind, right from his childhood and school time down to his youth and age, with special reference to his attitude and perspective towards nature, French evolution, the concept of liberty, and the philosophy of imagination, literature, text, and poetry as well. Needless to say, Wordsworth was essentially a poet of nature, and he is regarded as the high priest of nature. And in his mature poem Tinta Neve, he himself states, while addressing to his sister Dorothy, that he was an ardent worshipper of nature, knowing it fairly well that nature never betrays the true heart that loves her. The Prelude, Book 1, begins with Wordsworth's romantic imagination and his environmental consciousness in a magnificent autumn day on his return to the beloved Lake District. It is after a protracted separation from his native place in Cockermouth that hastened Wordsworth's romantic longing for his native place and the Derwent landscape which he had enjoyed right from his childhood. Here it is important to note that the river Derwent plays a significant part in shaping the body and mind and heart and soul of Wordsworth, with its origin in Lake District. River Derwent, with its black and pure water, stands for purity of mind, and the river has shaped Wordsworth's mind and heart right from his childhood. And in the opening lines, Wordsworth has given a graphic description of the Derwent landscape, and that river Derwent is delineated as the fairest of water, I quote, of all rivers, with elder sets, rocky falls, forked and shallows, bright blue water. And I quote from the poem, O Derwent, winding among grassy holms, ceaseless music, unquote. So Derwent is personified as a bosom friend of Wordsworth, which helped Wordsworth compose his own thoughts and which shaped his mind with infant softness. I quote, Derwent gave him immaculate joy and infant softness in the midst of, I quote, the fretful dwellings of mankind, unquote. This is strongly reminiscent of Wordsworth's frustration with French Revolution, and therefore he longs for the beauty of solitude that the Derwent landscape breathes among the hills and groves. Derwent is described again as a tempting playmate, I quote, whom Wordsworth dearly loved, and it is into this bosom of his dear friend Derwent that Wordsworth jumped as a 5-year child in summer, basked in the sun, jumped on the sandy fields, had a leap through flowery groves of yellow ragwort, and Wordsworth, the child, was imagined as a naked savage in the thunder shower. Now, this brilliant description of Derwent landscape justified the fact that Wordsworth has deliberately decided to make Prelude an important poem where nature has a big say, a big role, because nature is always treated as a moral teacher, the friend, philosopher, and guide and guardian of the poet's body, mind, heart, and soul. And Wordsworth's love for nature is succinctly indicated from the description of the Derwent landscape, and the poet always bends upon the flashback technique of going back to the past, and he emphasizes here the efficacy of recollection and the poetics of memory, which he later on developed in his preface to lyrical ballads, while defining poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. He recognizes candidly that after his hectic tour and disillusionment with the outcome of the French Revolution, his mind has been overpowered with a prosaic dullness and artificiality of the contemporary life and society in France and London. It is now the right time, Wordsworth wishes and feels, that he creates some profound work of art, because art is the veritable panacea for a broken and anguished heart and soul. And therefore, Wordsworth tended to emphasize three inevitable ingredients of creativity in the book 1 of the Prelude, and these are a vital soul, number 1, knowledge of the underlying principles of things, number 2, and a lot many painstaking observations of natural phenomena, number 3. So these are the three vital literary weapons with which the book 1 of the Prelude is enriched. Wordsworth tended to teach the readers about a vital soul with his fantastic vision of the knowledge about the unity of the principles of things, and finally reorienting his painstaking observations about life and natural phenomena in an ideally romantic manner which would satisfy the reader. His disillusionment with the outcome of the French Revolution, coupled with his sickness for the artificial way of London life, prompted him to set aside historical and war-related themes of harsh reality in favor of some more philosophically fired and psychologically subcharged subjects of life, including childhood innocence and frolicsome activities of his boyhood. His intimate association with the Derwent River, as discussed above, right from his childhood, and his emphasis on the sights and sounds, weather and air, and the Derwent landscape as a whole, prepares a fertile spiritual background for his freedom of mind, freedom from the cacophony of the shocking world of experiences he had had in France and London as well in the backdrop of the Great Revolution. He therefore deliberately relapses into the memory of his childhood and the pristine association with River Derwent and the surrounding environment of the Vale of Grasmere, which is strongly reminiscent of his depiction of the River Wey and the Tintern landscape in his poem Tinternebe, which is also an autobiography in miniature. Wordsworth searches for sure solace and lasting truth in his childhood memories of nature and natural landscape, knowing it fairly well that nature never betrays the true heart that loves her. With his wings of memory and recollection, Wordsworth brings to the fore his childhood activities and experiences of bathing, frolicsome dancing, wandering at night, stealing eggs from birds' nests, and sporting in the river like a naked savage, which is symbolically significant because it points to the naked simplicity of a child in the lap of nature. Simplicity is the hallmark of nobility, and Wordsworth's emphasis on the pristine purity and primal innocence of the solitary reaper, the nature's Shakuntala in form of Lucy, the Cumberland beggar, the leech gatherer, and the simple girl in the poem We Are Seven, all strongly remind us of William Blake's lamp and the child in Songs of Innocence on the one hand, and his poetical and philosophical mentor Rousseau's emphasis on the concepts of primitive simplicity and noble savage and natural man on the other. The beginning of the prelude, with its childhood memory and experience, serves two important functions. Firstly, it prepares a spiritual setting to the poem, thereby indicating the efficacy of the divine relationship between man and nature. Secondly, it reminds the reader of the fact that nature is the best moral teacher and also the best nurse to nourish the ills and wounds of the disillusioned poet and his mind and heart, so as to open up a new beginning in form of the philosophical autobiography called the Prelude. If autobiography is viewed as a form of confession and candid revelation, Prelude bears ample testimony to Wordsworth's free and frank revelation of his childhood experiences, such as stealing eggs from bird's nest and also stealing a boat to row at night across the Wordsworth lake. He also frankly expresses how he used to play winter ice games and games of cards with his friends. And this shows that disillusioned with the artificialities and the prosaic manner of the people in France and London, Wordsworth came back with a heavy heart and now decided to relapse into the elemental world of innocence and natural landscape, bereft of power, pride, pretense, hypocrisy, and artificialities of civilization and society. It is this attitude or outlook that stimulated Wordsworth to love nature more and more, which culminated in his idea of philosophical pantheism, which means one in all and all in one. And pantheism is a spiritual realization of the fact that in a state of blessed mood, we should think that one divine spirit rolls through all things, both in nature and in the mind of man. In a state of purity and perfection, or what Wordsworth says in Tinternebe, blessed mood and elevated thought, human mind can become essentially divine. In the Prelude, he also tells us candidly that pantheism has overpowered his mind and heart for some time, and that while contemplating on the spirit of the universe, the sad poet gradually withdraws from the artificialities and the din and bustle of life and civilization in favor of the blessed mood and the bliss of solitude through man's communion with nature, and finally in search of a permanent and enduring way of life manifested through art and nature. Apart from his engaging interest in outdoor activities and love for nature and the idea of philosophical pantheism, Wordsworth also clearly states before his readers how nature has not only shaped his philosophical and spiritual bent of mind, but also shaped his romantic sensibility and his romantic theory of poetry and aesthetics. He calls upon the clergymen and followers of fine arts and idealistic philosophers to realize the deeper meaning and harmonious design of the universe behind the veil of artificiality and the illusion of darkness. He also sincerely expects that these people endowed with the third eye should make the layman realize and understand the skull beneath the skin and the idea of oneness of things, or what Wordsworth says in Tinternebe, to see life into things. The Prelude is therefore a mature, philosophically and psychologically surcharged autobiographical poem in which Wordsworth gradually transcends the readers with the help of beautiful blank verse and its characteristic romantic imagination from an extremely personal world of the poet to the deliberations on nature as a spiritual teacher and to a discussion on the permanence of enduring things in life and art, with an intense pantheistic realization that human beings should realize and feel the cosmic mechanism of divinity that rolls through everything. Human life will be really worthwhile and rather amply rewarded if we realize this harmonious design of divinity and above all the unity of man, nature and God. It is in this sense that the Prelude can be acclaimed as a spiritual autobiography that vindicates, in the words of David Dyches, Wordsworth's typical egotistical sublime. The Prelude is therefore a philosophical poem in which life is viewed in terms of a trajectory, in which literal journeys become the metaphorical vehicles for a spiritual journey towards the cosmic realization of unity of things. Apart from the autobiographical dimensions of the poem, the recent critics like Soz O and Franco Moretti tend to establish the Prelude as a Bildungsroman, which is often set in the question paper for my dear students. You will take note of this part because this is very, very significant from the standpoint of the examination. So, the word Bildungsroman has its German origin, which means building, but the critics interpret it mostly within the framework of a fictional narrative. So, Bildungsroman is developed within the framework of a fictional narrative, and the best example of Bildungsroman is found in Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. So, Bildungsroman is a fictional narrative which can be also applied to long poetic narratives or narrative poems. And in that sense, the Prelude is also a Bildungsroman because it is a long narrative poem. The first character of Bildungsroman is justified in the narrative of Wordsworth under the title The Prelude. And at the same time, a Bildungsroman is associated with a slow but steady human development of personality and development of man's being through trials and tribulations, through a series of significant changes and the process towards maturity. So, my dear students, try to mark these three words. So, it is a development of personality, integrity of one's character through a series of trials and tribulations and through changes and the process of changes. And this idea has been very brilliantly elaborated in Hans Georg Gadamer's Truth and Method, name of the work. And with this short definition on Bildungsroman, which emphasizes human development of a personality through change and process, let us approach Wordsworth's The Prelude as a Bildungsroman, and because like the fictional narrative, the Prelude has also a narrative structure. As I have already told you, it comprises 14 books, right from the book 1, which deals with Wordsworth's childhood experience and school time, down to the book number 14, we find a series of developments taking place from Wordsworth's experiences in London and to the experience in Cambridge, to his summer days, to his trajectory into the world of books, and then the 3 books subsequently, book number 9 and 10 and 11, devoted to Wordsworth's encounter with the French experience in the backdrop of French Revolution. Then finally the second part, dealing with Wordsworth's theory of poetry, imagination, art, and aesthetic text. All these things justify different aspects of the development of Wordsworthian personality. And this is not an easy way or an easy method of development. It requires change, and through a process of hurdles and experiences of trials and tribulations, Wordsworth the child finally attains a steady growth and development in his personality into a mature being. In other words, the Prelude is a Bildungsroman in which we notice or locate Wordsworth's development of his personality slowly but steadily from his childhood experiences to his boyhood experience and youthful experiences in London, Cambridge, and France, down to his mature experience in the later youth, where he forwards his literary theory of poetry, imagination, and aesthetic taste, and until he attains a stage of maturity. Therefore, as a Bildungsroman, the Prelude is a trajectory from innocence to maturity of the later youth. And it reminds me of the progress of Tinterneve and Wordsworth's progression in his attitude towards nature in Tinterneve, where you find in Tinterneve, Wordsworth's attitude towards nature moves from sensation to sensuousness and from sensuousness to sublimity. Likewise, in Prelude also, we find here there is a development in Wordsworth's personality from childhood innocent experiences of naked savage, I've already quoted, to the boyhood frolicsome and fickle experiences of stealing eggs and stealing a boat and then playing cards and winter ice games as a fickle youth, to his mature vision of philosophical pantheism and his development of literary theory, poetic theory, and his art and imagination and taste, which signify the maturity of Wordsworth's mind. And that way, the Prelude is a brilliant study in the personality of Wordsworth, and hence it is a poetic Bildungsroman. Now, to wind up, my dear friends, the Prelude is not an ordinary poem. It is a complex poem, a psychologically and spiritually and philosophically surcharged poem in which Wordsworth banks upon childhood innocence, pristine purity, primal simplicity, and the communion between man and nature, and with emphasis on Wordsworth's attachment and friendly association with the Darwin landscape in Book 1, finally culminating in his idea of unity of the cosmos through the inviolable relationship between man, nature, and